Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I'm Lewis Cypher, and this is the Devil's Advocate Debate Club. Welcome back, and it's good to be back. While there are plenty of more serious subjects I plan to cover, I figured I'd keep it light and fun for my return, so we're going to talk about a poll that I saw on Twitter about video games. Now, the poll was for which of 4 video game worlds you would like to try to survive. So basically, you have to survive the main story of the game. You have the powers and abilities of the main character, not your own human limitations. And while it wasn't specified in the post itself whether or not you would be returned home or stuck in this world with the consequences at the end of the game, everyone in the thread seemed to assume that you would be stuck in the world, not returned home, so that's the assumption we're going to be running with for this video. The 4 video games in question were Dark Souls, Resident Evil 2, Silent Hill, and Dead Space. And I really think that about 75% of the people who voted in this poll, a poll with almost 2,500 votes, got it completely wrong. So we're just going to go through these in order from worst to best, in my opinion, though the last 2 are pretty much subjective. So, first and worst, with almost 45% of the votes, was Dark Souls. Now, Dark Souls is, as far as I know, considered to be one of the hardest video games of its genre. It is legendary for being a brutal challenge. So it might seem like a bad choice if, dead means dead, which the original poster made it clear that it did. However, there's a catch. See, Dark Souls has in-canon resurrection. Your save points or resurrection points are bonfires, which are actually a part of the storyline. So your character, when reviving at them, it's part of the story. And everyone in the thread seemed to think that this meant that dead meant dead for the other 3 games, but not for Dark Souls. This is fairly valid. However, in the game Dark Souls, when you die and revive at one of these points, you have less health. They seem to be missing the storyline reason behind this, which is that you're slowly turning into a hollow and losing your memories and your humanity. Every time you die, you lose a piece of yourself. So people talked about how, we'll just pick Dark Souls because you have infinite chances and eventually you'll make your way through, right? Just take magic. It's like playing the game on easy mode. But anyone who's played it knows that there really is no easy mode for Dark Souls. You're going to most likely die dozens or hundreds of times, and unlike when playing the game, you're going to be losing your memories and your mind as you go, meaning that after each death, you have a significantly lower chance of surviving and making it through the next time. After a couple of dozen, you really have no chance at all. Also, as we seem to be assuming, or at least most of the people in the thread were, that you would be continuing living in this world after the storyline, well, there isn't exactly an after the storyline for the first Dark Souls. It becomes an endless cycle where you're basically just put back in at the beginning to do it all over again. So Dark Souls, in my opinion, despite the fact that it's the only game that gives you an resurrection method, was by far the worst choice, but by a fair margin, the most popular. Now, I personally know that I, having only played the game a couple of times, couldn't make it through Dark Souls without dying a couple dozen times, and thus would not even consider it. I've seen some posts about people who claim to be able to, as one guy said, play the game blindfolded with one arm tied behind his back without deaths, in which case, if you've memorized every route and every single aspect of that game and had not played the other three, there's an argument that at least you could survive for another round of nightmarish torture. The upside is that you get to play with magic and theoretically get infinite chances even if you're losing your memory. I wouldn't suggest Dark Souls. Next, and second most popular, though second worst in my opinion, is Resident Evil 2, with around 30% of the vote. Oh, and this poll had about 2,500 votes, so, but people engaged with this poll. Resident Evil 2, a lot more of you are probably familiar with the plot since it's similar to the movies, is a zombie apocalypse game where you have to survive through Raccoon City as zombies infected with the T-virus try and take you down. Now, these aren't just your average run-of-the-mill zombies. The T-virus causes dangerous mutations which make them more deadly than your average Night of the Living Dead crawler. Resident Evil also makes it very clear in every canon that this is going to be a world-scale apocalyptic event. So, while surviving Resident Evil with your memories intact and, some semblance of sanity left seems a lot more reasonable to me than Dark Souls, you're then left to face the underground Umbrella Corporation and all of its monstrosities in an apocalyptic world. 2 out of 10 would not suggest playing again. Well, playing, sure, but living through in a world where dead means dead? No thank you. Now, these last two get a little bit more complicated because there's a lot of back and forth here, and I can definitely see arguments for both sides. Coming in with 10% of the vote, well behind the two that I didn't even consider for a second when making my choice, is Silent Hill. Silent Hill, for anyone who's played the games or seen who hasn't played the games or seen the movies, is a horror psycho thriller about, the town of Silent Hill, where absolutely everything is messed up. There's a dark cult who will kill your family members if you get involved with them and everyone you love. There's monstrosities ripped straight from your own psyche. The town will literally bring your darkest, most horrifying inner demons alive and force you to face off against them. Now, this is the original Silent Hill, so there are 4 or 5 different endings, but if you've played the game before and can remember how to get through it, or if you, just make sure to poke around the edges of the town as you go through, you're very, very likely to get one of the good endings, where the main character escapes Silent Hill. And unlike the first 2 options, once you're out, the rest of the world is just fine. Now, I've definitely seen arguments that the evil, insane cult might be out to get you, that there are potential downsides, but it's also essentially a free therapy lesson or session. From what we've seen, the characters who make it through one of the Silent Hill settings come out the other side better people. And ultimately speaking, it is by far an easier game than the first 2 listed, so your odds of surviving are actually quite high as long as you're careful and play your cards right. And again, once you make it out the other side, the rest of the world's just fine. There's even a chance, if you play your cards right, that you'll basically heal the town, erasing any chance of, the psychosis happening again, though you would still have to worry about the insane cult potentially coming after you. So, Silent Hill I give a very solid chance to, and ultimately went back and forth a little bit before voting for my pick, coming in with just over 14% of the vote, Dead Space. Now, I voted for Dead Space for several reasons. One, I would absolutely love to play in space. You get to play around in zero-G, you get a upgradable fusion cutter, which is one of the coolest guns in video game history, depending on how you upgrade it. And more than that, I played through the game twice on the hardest difficulty, and neither time did I die. I know for a fact that I can make it through Dead Space alive, unlike any of the other 3 games. So it was really a no-brainer for me once I stopped and thought about it. More than that, once you escape the space station where the game takes place on, you can make it back to a technologically utopic Earth. While the events of the future games do show that Earth is still potentially going to experience some troubles as the markers that are driving everyone insane and turning them into space zombies tend to pop up all over the place, there are a limited number of them, as we've only ever found one and the rest are just man-made. So if you have your memories from outside of the game and get to take your plasma cutter back to Earth with you, I don't see too much of a problem of surviving any outbreaks that happen or informing the government of the true dangers and really just convincing the right people to properly shut the whole thing down and fire them all into the sun. So, while you don't live in a world that's perfect, as ultimately speaking, more problems are coming, there's also not an insane psychotic cult specifically coming to get you. The problems are more generalized for the whole population, and everyone's going to be helping you deal with them. You get to keep cool tech, you get to play in space. I really don't understand how Silent Hill and Dead Space combined came up with only about 25% of this vote. Like I said, I really feel that people had this one wrong. And when looking through the arguments in the thread beneath it, it all seemed to come down to, well, but you just have infinite chances at Dark Souls. Yeah, infinite chances to repeat the cycle of pain until you eventually lose all of your humanity and memories. Again, no thanks. So, I'm not going to call you an idiot for picking Silent Hill, even though I took Dark Souls. It really comes down to one of those two, unless you've just played Resident Evil enough times to make it through. No matter how good you are at Dark Souls, though, under the assumption that most people seem to have, that you're not going to be going home at the end of the game, I can't see why anyone would pick it, less yet close to 45% of almost 1,500 people. But, hey, that's just my opinion. Interestingly enough, when I first voted in the poll, Silent Hill and Dead Space were both at about 10%. The percentages for the other games all remained the same or dropped only slightly after I posted a 10 or 11 tweet long thread about why I thought everyone was being stupid. Now, I don't know how many people actually read this. I do know that almost every vote that came in after that would have had to have been for Dead Space, with only a few coming in for Silent Hill to hold its percentage even, as the other two dropped by a couple of percentage points. So I have to wonder if I had posted my thoughts earlier in the polling, as I came in after about 2,000 of the votes were already in, whether or not things would have been different. I guess we'll never know. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you played these games? Which world would you want to try and live through the storyline of? And just to cover everything else, I'm sorry that I've been gone. I really am. However, uploading a video on my internet on my phone can take a couple of days, and I've been job hunting, so I just couldn't dedicate the resources, my only internet resource to anything other than that until I found a job. But I have. So you guys should be hearing more from me soon. I'm not going to give any specific schedule until I actually start and get settled into my job, but I promise that unless things go completely tits up for me again, it won't be a couple months like it was last time. So, thanks everyone for watching. I know I'm a little bit rusty, but I'll get back in the game for my next video, which is going to be on a much more serious topic. As always, I'm your host, Louis Cypher. Thanks for watching the Devil's Advocate Debate Club.